Now that we are establishing authenticated session by setting up Nuxt session cookie, it's time to bind registration logic to this registration form. First of all, let's find out what component is responsible for showing this registration form. That is register page component. I'm going to open up this component in the editor. And what we're gonna start with is with defining a couple of reactive variables that we are going to bind to each input field of registration form. Those variables are email, password, as well as password confirmation. And down here, let's also create handler that is going to handle form submission. I'm gonna call it handle register. And in here, let's use $fetch function provided by Nuxt for sending HTTP requests. We're going to call our API endpoint /API/register, and as a second param into this function, we're about to pass configuration object where we will specify what type of this HTTP request is, which will be post in our case, and by using body object, we can specify additional params that are going to be sent to the backend. In our case, let's specify a couple of params, email and password, and values of those params we're going to fetch from reactive variables, email and password. And if this request will be successful, meaning that user will be registered, we're going to redirect him to another page, for example, playlists page, by using navigate to helper, which is also provided by Nuxt. Moving on to the template and bind handle register handler to this form. I'm going to use submit event directive with prevent modifier to prevent default browser behavior when we're gonna submit this form. And each reactive variable has to be bound to each input field. We can do so by using the model directive. In the first case, for the email field, I'm also going to use string modifier to ensure that there will be no empty spaces at the beginning or at the end of the email. And we are using this vmodel directive for the other variables to bind password field to the password reactive variable and to bind confirmation field to password confirmation variable. And after this, I'm going to open up database client to clear records in the users table. Open up browser and try to register. First of all, let's make sure that all the values that we are gonna input in these fields will be reflected in the reactive variables. The moment I'm gonna start typing, as you can see in Vue DevTools, reactive variables receive values. So it's working as we expect to. I'm gonna populate all input fields. And now let's take a look at the network tab and see what request will be executed once we're going to submit this form. I'm gonna click sign up. We have been redirected to the playlist page, but none of the requests appear in network tab, and that is because here I have some filters applied. Let me remove these filters, and there we go. We got register request. So we have received expected response from the server, and as you can see, along with this request, we're sending a couple of params, email and password, those values that the user has specified in the form. Sure enough, we're seeing new record in the users table, and also session cookie has been established. If we'll open up application tab and check what cookies have been set to the corresponding domain of our application, here we're seeing the cookie with the name Nuxt session. So we have been registered and authenticated successfully, but if we'll try to open up a register page, we're allowed to do so even though we are currently authenticated. We have to prevent such cases when, if the user is authenticated, he's not allowed to open up register or login page. And for now, I'm going to do it directly in the register page component. We can use user session function to receive current state of the user session. This function is provided by Nuxt util package, and this logged in variable is a reactive variable which we can use to check current state of user session. If this variable has truthy value, that means the current user is authenticated, and we're about to redirect him to the playlist page. Let me open up register page once again, and as you can see, we will always get redirected to the playlist page, so we're not allowed to open register page while we're authenticated. But if I'm going to manually remove this session cookie and fully refresh the page, and then try to open up a register page, this time register page opens up since the current user is no longer authenticated. And just to follow best practices according to Nuxt Utils documentation, we always have to refresh user's session after authentication. We can do so by using function called fetch. I'm also gonna specify fetch user session alias for this function, and down here right after registration, let's call this function to refresh user session. This function is asynchronous, so we have to wait until it's finished by using await keyword like this. One more time, let's clear out users table and register new user. I'm going to quickly populate all these fields and submit registration form. Let's make sure that we are redirected to the playlists page and that Nuxt session cookies has been set. There we go, everything works as expected. And even if I try to input the address of the registration page directly in the address bar, I'm still going to be redirected back to the playlists page. The link to the repository of this project will be in the video description.